So I love the scripture reading from Job today. It's one of our readings for camp this summer. That in the midst of this long poetic reflection about suffering comes these verses. Ask the animals, and they will teach you. The birds of the air, and they will tell you. And the plants of the earth, and they will teach you. And the fish of the sea will declare to you. I love this understanding that we learn from creation. That somehow in creation is not just sort of the fingerprints of the great creator, but that they themselves have a voice, that they themselves have things to teach us along the way. Medieval mystic Meister Eckhart once said, "If I spent enough time with the tiniest creature, even a caterpillar, I would never have to prepare a sermon. So full of God is every creature." So I'll just hand out caterpillars now. But there is something wondrous and wonderful about creation. And usually when I ask people where they find God, they have a lot to say about outside and outdoors and, on the hiking trails and in the mountains. We do learn things about what it is to be part of this ecosystem. This year, for Earth Day, the coalition of churches that form the Eco-Justice League suggested their theme be the canopy of trees. You might have noticed from the offertory, we're thinking along the tree line today. And we acknowledge the essential nature of trees, not just for providing us paper and wood for building and heating, but also for protecting and enriching soils, for cleaning water, for providing us with air, for reducing global warming. It's been said that our forests are the lungs of our planet. And yet, the amount of forest cover for each person declined by 50% since 1960. Think about that. 50% of forest cover for each person has declined. I got to thinking about what I've learned from trees, and I found myself remembering, sorry, I don't know why my clicker isn't clicking today. There we go. A great trip I took a few years ago along the West Coast, where I got to visit both the redwoods and the sequoias. What I was particularly spent a lot of time in Sequoia National Park and in Kings Canyon with these trees that averaged 200 to 300 feet tall. And so I think I have a slide here that shows you, yes, like the apple tree is the one all the way over there, and then the 10-story building, and then you get into these sequoias and just how humongous they really are. The largest tree in the world, General Sherman, has a volume of 52,508 cubic feet and weighs, I have no idea how they figured this out, weighs 2.7 million pounds and has a circumference of 102 feet around its base. The branches are 7 feet in diameter, and they think that this tree is about 2,500 years old. And so I found myself thinking as I walked around through these ginormous trees about what they had what had happened during their lifespan, like what was going on 25 years ago when these were saplings and seedlings, and kind of what the range of history was for these trees. The General Grant tree, which is pictured there, it takes 20 people to hold hands to get all the way around it, just to give you a sense of just how big these trees are. That General Grant tree, they think, is 1,700 years old, and it stands 268 feet tall. These trees, the sequoias, came to fame in the late 1800s. They were well known to the native peoples in the area, but as American pioneers traveled west and found them, stories began to circulate. And people who had gone west for the gold rush decided there was wealth to be made by chopping down these trees. Let's see, they've got some pictures of that there. Yeah. There was one famous story about the mammoth tree, which was chopped down. It took 3 weeks, apparently, to chop this tree down. And the fame of the trees was such that there was a hotel that was quickly built on the site that hosted an influx of tourists. And to entertain them, they used to have tea dances on the stump of this giant tree. And they built a bowling alley in the part of the tree that was now kind of lying flat on the ground. The good news about these tourists coming was that they were horrified by the loss of these trees, and a movement began to spread to save them. Sequoia National Park was the second of our national parks to be established after Yellowstone. The Redwood National Forest took a little bit more effort to cobble together through the years. So I was curious about the roots that hold up these giant trees, and so I asked a ranger, and she told me that the roots for these trees only go down about 14 to 20 feet. So think of 14 to 20 feet and 200 feet up there. But, she said, they stretch as wide as the tree is tall. So think about that. Tree roots going like 3 football field lengths out and around. And because the sequoias are able to stand close together, with each other, they support each other. And in fact, their roots become intertwined. And there is a kind of interweaving, a matting together of these roots that form a network that provides incredible strength and stability to the sequoias. It kind of reminds me of, as much as we might look at a tree and think, oh, that's a tree, but in fact, it's part of this community of trees that makes it strong, that makes it grow, that makes it survive. And it reminds me that I think that's one of those things that the trees can teach us, that we need one another, that none of us is truly independent, but we are interdependent and supporting each other. The ranger told me something else, that through this network of roots, the trees talk to each other. We don't think about trees as talking, but they are communicating along the way. Ecologist Suzanne Simard says that trees are linked to neighboring trees, not just sequoias, but other trees too, in an underground network of fungi that resembles the neural networks of our brain. In one study, she said she watched a Douglas fir that had been injured by some insects, and the tree appeared to send out a chemical warning through the root system to a ponderosa pine that was growing nearby. The pine tree then produced a defense enzyme to protect itself against that insects. In addition to warning each other of danger, Simard says the trees have been known to share nutrients during critical times to keep each other healthy. She says the trees in a forest are often linked to each other via an older tree that she calls the mother or the hub tree. In connecting all the trees of different ages, these mother trees actually facilitate the growth of the understory seedlings, she says. The seedlings link into the network of old trees and benefit from a huge uptake of resource capacity. And the old trees pass on a little bit of carbon and nutrient and water to the little seedlings at crucial times during their lives that actually help them survive. Help! Land over here. Conserve resources. Get off. My food is ready to eat. These are just some of the messages that we know that the plants, whether it be a patch of moss or a 300-foot sequoia, seem to be sending to one another through their electrical impulses, through their hormones, through their ultrasonic popping noises, through their roots with microbes and fungi. It's kind of amazing. I mean, I just don't think about trees as being communicative, and yet scientists are finding more and more that they are, and that they support each other. So on this road trip down the West Coast, as I was visiting national parks, I came across, this is called the living stump. This is a tree stump, and what makes it different than most tree stumps is you see like the bark has grown over the top of it. It's actually alive, even though they chopped it down, and even though it has no leaves in order to support it, by gathering sunlight. And the reason why it is alive is because its root system has interwoven with the tree next to it. And the tree next to it is providing it with the nutrients and resources that it needs so that this tree stump is alive, which is, I guess, was so significant that they made that a special roadside attraction. But it just got me thinking about how we can learn from the trees, how we as individuals need to understand ourselves as networked, as connected, and the ways that we too can support one another, even those of us who maybe feel like we've been chopped down and are struggling, not only just to survive, but to thrive in what can be very difficult circumstances. We've talked about how trees are important physically to creation, but I think what I learned from them is this interconnectedness. Okay, here's a really bad pun. What scientists have termed the wood wide web. You're allowed to groan there. About how trees support each other in a sort of community. And I think about that kind of spiritual nature. Listen to the animals. Listen to the trees. They can teach us. So for Earth Day 2026, the Eco Justice Network is talking to us about the canopy of trees and what we do to support them. And their justice concern is, they said, in the cities across the United States, there is a striking correlation between areas that had been historically redlined on maps and the modern day tree canopy maps. That the communities that were historically redlined and sort of selected as not very good places to live are the ones that lack tree canopy coverage. And so those communities, as you layer on social and economic factors like race and income and asthma rates, we see the trend continuing. In fact, what they find is that believe it or not, there's an American Forest Tree Equity Score. That lower income areas typically have 26% less tree cover and are exposed to temperatures on an average 6 degrees higher than their wealthier neighbors. And in communities of color, the tree cover disparity increases to 38%, meaning that those communities can experience temperatures 13 degrees warmer than their neighboring, wealthier, more tree-covered communities. And so the eco-justice community is calling us to think about this and highlighting churches that are doing tree planting programs, and particularly in urban environments and in poor urban communities, as a way to bring back a kind of equity and health along the way. I'm very struck by Romans 8 when it talks about all of creation as groaning and suffering, and making its struggle known to us. We certainly can experience that as we look at what's happening to our planet, as we look at the impact that we are having on our planet. Since we've been focusing on trees today, I would share with you one of the top 8 ecological issues that we're talking about this Earth Day is deforestation. And one sort of shocking statistic is every hour, forests the size of 300 football fields are cut down on this planet. Every hour, forests the size of 300 football fields are cut down. Obviously not as significantly in this country as in places like Brazil or the Democratic Republic of Congo or Indonesia, but these numbers are real and they have an impact on all of us because when we think about the needs of our planet, borders and boundaries are not quite as evident. Now, why is this happening? Agriculture is the leading cause of deforestation, and the land is cleared so they can raise livestock or so they can plant other crops that are being sold, like sugarcane and palm oil. And so how do we help these communities to be sustaining at the same time as preserving the forest that is so essential to the health of our planet and to all of us. I think a lot of us were very struck by the recent Artemis mission along the way, and very struck by what the astronauts had to say. Christina Koch had said shortly after they took off, she said, "We do not leave Earth, we choose it." And as they were returning, they talked about, as they were looking out the window at Earth, and they said, from space, as you're looking at the planet, you don't see any boundaries or borders. You see one planet, one community, one whole being that we share together, and talked about how important that was to understand that. Christina Koch said as they were coming back towards Earth, "We will explore, we will build ships, we will visit again, we will construct science outposts, we will drive rovers, we will do radio astronomy, we will found companies, we will bolster industry, we will inspire. But ultimately, we will always choose Earth. We will always choose each other." I think the astronauts from the moon and the trees are calling on us in the same way, to choose Earth, to choose each other, to recognize our interdependence and how we are part of this glorious web of creation that God has given us, and how fragile it is, how important it is for us to steward it well.